Right now on Tech Radio, you need to be over 18 to listen to this podcast.
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week online and on air with RT Radio, we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and across the world. You're welcome to episode 1077, looking back on the 7 biggest stories of the week, including surprising new ways that tech is stealing your data, why you could soon need a digital passport to access the internet, and AI is starting to show its dark side when it comes to jobs. Let's get into it.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty. Niall Kitson on holidays this week, so we are joined by the fantastic Jason Walsh. How are you doing, Jason?
Doing very well, Dusty. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no bother at all. I love reading your stuff on techcentral.ie, and we are looking at some of the big stories of the week, starting off with WeTransfer. Now, this is a service I use all the time for transferring data and files, and what I like about it is I use the free version, so it's kind of like if I want to send you a file, there's all the files, and in 3 days' time, they're deleted, and that's the end of it. It's nice and simple, but apparently not.
Yeah, not as simple as it used to be. Like you, I use it all the time because I have managed to fill up my Gmail account with photographs over the years, sending high-res pictures into magazines. And you need to throw those files around. It's even worse if you're doing video. What do? WeTransfer is there. You upload the file, it sends you a link, you send that to the person. Everything's great until they change their terms and services saying that they've given themselves a permanent license to your content, including use for potentially training machine learning. Obviously, an immediate massive backlash because this is used by all sorts of people. For example, in the media industry, it's used by architects for sending blueprints. Yeah. Does WeTransfer now own the designs to a building? Apparently it does. Obviously, everyone went mental. WeTransfer has now backed down saying, oh, we didn't mean that. We're not going to train any AIs. We're not going to steal your data. Now, either they were caught red-handed, in which case, good, I'm glad they were caught, or they just got a kind of generic standard issue legal firm to throw out a standard contract that just says, everything that you think you own, we own that. Now, that is even more worrying.
I don't think it was the latter because as a company the size of WeTransfer just doesn't put out boilerplate legal documents.
Yeah, you would think not. But I mean, I do wonder, is it the case that these tech companies now just think that they have an absolute right to your stuff? So they're just, generically writing these kind of licenses into their contracts. I mean, we all know the end user license agreement on software. Has anyone ever read one?
Of course not.
Yeah.
What is it, 20 pages or something like that? Nobody reads that.
Some of them are hundreds and not written in plain English. And of course, the problem is if you write them in plain English, they won't stand up in court. So there's a kind of, a two-sided problem here.
Why will they not stand up in court if they're written in plain English?
Because the law requires extremely fine, perfect definitions, I know there have been some moves to clarify language to the point where it can be read by both lawyers and human beings, but we haven't quite got there yet.
That's really interesting, actually. So if you try and simplify it back, a judge will say, well, look, that's too simple for the court.
Yeah, you've introduced potential ambiguity. It's maybe not the judge, it'd be the opposing lawyer who will come back with that.
Okay. All right. Oh, well, that's really interesting. I know from what you've read of the story, could it be a case with WeTransfer is that they are saying that they need a license to reproduce your content because obviously what they're doing is you're putting your content or whatever the file is onto their server. So they would need permission from you to do that, which is essentially making a copy of your work and then forwarding it on to whoever you want to. Is it as simple as that? Or did they specifically say that they were going to use it to train AI? Or did they specifically say that they were going to use your content in other ways?
There was a specific clause in the contract that said uploaded files could be used to improve machine learning models, which really alarmed people.
Okay, definitely not. Okay, well, I will be making a note not to use...
Well, they've backtracked from all of this now.
Okay, grand. So what's the story today then?
The story is they will not be using any specific, quote, no specific kind of AI was being considered for use. There is no change in how we handle your content in practice. And they've removed the machine learning and AI clause from the contract.
Okay. Oh, well, that's good. Interesting story, kind of related to that. There was an article of Business Insider this week that said that the Perplexity CEO said that tech giants will copy anything that's good.
Yeah. Kind of interesting. What's interesting about this is that Perplexity, of course, isn't a tech giant. It's a startup, and it's facing stiff competition from the likes of Google and Microsoft. So that's what their CEO was saying. That, startups like us have to just face the facts that the big guys are going to steal. However, Perplexity itself has been in the spotlight for sort of lifting artistic works, content of books and all kinds of things, academic articles, and despite previously claiming that it didn't. So I think in a sense, he accidentally said the quiet part out loud.
I think it's kind of like, I think it's taken as a given. Okay, listen, you and I both watch what's happening in tech. I would take it as a given that all AI is stealing your data to a certain extent in order to train its AI.
Yes. The problem is a lot of people don't think that way. I mean, I have friends who work, they're not tech people. They're not even particularly interested in tech. And they've been bunging stuff into AIs since ChatGPT really hit the mainstream in November 2022. I remember one person saying to me, "Oh, it's blocked in my work. I have to use it on my phone." And I said, "Well, of course it's blocked in your work. They don't want you putting your confidential company information into it."
Yeah. Do you know, I've kind of taken a switch on that myself, because I would normally be very, as Niall will tell you, very much a tin hat. But I kind of I have a different attitude to work stuff than I would have to personal stuff.
Yeah.
And the work stuff is just kind of work stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like I wouldn't be kind of as tetchy about it as I would private stuff, So I'd probably use it with AI a lot more. Anyway, that's that.
Yeah, but I mean, that's an interesting point, and I would agree with you. But then we're both kind of running our own little things. If you work for a big company, they may feel differently.
Oh, true. Well, I mean, we do work with big companies, big banking companies. There was a big company in the States we've just signed a contract with. I mean, it's only for making a podcast, right? But we got a 25-page legal contract, which had to be gone through with a fine-tooth comb. And there was stuff in it which made me smile. One of the clauses that they put in is that they can withdraw at any time from the service. And I kind of went, you know what, that's just not on. You can't do that. The whole idea is we're signing a 12-month contract, and then to put in a clause that says I can pull it at any time. It just doesn't work. But when you're a small trader and you're up against a big company like that, and the lawyers, it's kind of like, what's the point in pointing it out? It'll drag things down 6 months.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we are all equal before the law, but we don't have equal funds to use the law. So,
well, whichever as it is. Anyway, other stories this week in tech. Now, this is interesting because it's all about kind of digital IDs and proving that you're over 18. And the EU now has got 5 countries in the EU. I think it's France is one of them. I think Germany is another. Spain maybe is another one. Whichever. Anyway, 5 countries in the EU are testing it out. The UK, independent of this, are actually also doing their own age verification experiment. And Reddit are also doing an independent age verification experiment as well, in order to access stuff that would be more suited for adults. You've an interesting kind of a take on this.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is, we all know what kind of content we're talking about here, so we don't need to go into detail. No. But what's interesting to me is that it suggests to me there's been a real change in how we approach the internet as a society, how we think about it. In the past, any attempt to bring in kind of digital ID was met with, how dare you, we have complete freedom, and you're just going to have to put up with the stuff you don't like. But now I think people are pushing back. They're going, no, I don't like this. There's too much. The tech companies, whatever way you want to define them, are getting away with far too much of their own, what they want. We are society. We elect politicians. We will decide what is acceptable and what's not. We're not going to accept that the internet is destiny, and whatever comes down the pipes is what's coming down the pipe. So I think it's an interesting, I think it's not directly related, but I think it is sort of related to the kind of Digital Services Act, in the sense that Europe in particular is sort of pushing back against the American tech giants.
Who will, that was it, Niall always says they play fast, break it quickly, or whatever, something like that. But I know what you mean, they're very laissez-faire, to use a European expression. When you say that we are pushing back against the tech sector, are you talking about ordinary citizens, the moms and pops and that kind of thing?
That's an interesting question. I definitely think that the average kind of European politician is starting to push back. But whether or not ordinary citizens are, I don't know. People are, I think, increasingly irritated by the sense that there's a big money grab going on and a data grab, as we discussed earlier. But I don't know, but we're not willing. I mean, I'm not going to give up the internet. I'm not going to get rid of my smartphone,
Of course not.
So, how far we can actually push back against these things, I don't know.
But what has a money grab or a data grab got to do with proving that you're over 18?
Nothing directly, but what I find interesting is that in the past, whatever the tech companies said was just the law. It was just the way it was. You had to accept it. If you want all the benefits of the internet, you have to put up with it. But I think that people are just generally beginning to say, hold on a minute, I have a right to a life in a certain kind of way, and I have a right to privacy, or I have a right to protect myself from my kids from this and that. So I just feel that there's a kind of, what do the kids say, a vibe shift. The mood is changing.
I think we're coming up with a younger generation the teenagers and the young people in their 20s now have got more of a sense of, I don't know, what's right or wrong or what's fair and equality for all, that kind of a way, and, they will not tolerate, or they seem to not tolerate hate speech. And there's an awful lot of hate speech going on the internet at the moment. And we're seeing the results of that in various wars around the place. And I would see kind of, the fact that you need to prove that you're over 18 is being very useful in those circumstances, because you don't want to. I signed up to TikTok recently. I haven't been on it in years. Okay, so and I use a different address, probably a different phone, whatever. The first thing I got was all get the migrants out of Ireland. Ireland is for the Irish. Dozens and dozens. I don't know why it even, because I didn't say that I was particularly male. I didn't say I was a particular age or anything like that, but that was the first thing that it gave me. And if you're kind of thinking of, a 13-year-old or an 8-year-old or something like that, and this is what they're exposed to, they'll just read it as, well, that must be the way it is. Yeah. Ireland's for the Irish. Get out then. So maybe having that little passport. I had a look into how the digital passport will work, and it's kind of interesting the way it is, particularly because the EU is so privacy focused. All right. And they want to protect that. So what they're trying out is an app that you download onto your phone. Okay. You need to scan a passport or some kind of official ID, possibly a driver's license. In Europe, of course, they've got national ID cards, one of those, okay? I didn't see it, but it wouldn't surprise me if you also have to take a photo of your face. Just to prove that it is you scanning that particular passport. It will then go, okay, that is checked against some kind of an official source. You are over 18. They delete the photo. They delete the passport. All that's left is a little token that says over 18. No more. All right. And in fact, I bet it doesn't even say over 18. I bet it just says yes or no.
Yeah, it's just a flag.
I bet it says 1 or 0. That's all that's left in the app.
Yeah.
Right. They call it zero knowledge proof, which I like. And the other thing that I like actually about it is the app itself is open source. So anybody can go in and make sure that the code
that it isn't secretly collecting all of this data.
Exactly.
Just on that point about hate, I mean, I don't know if the technology is going to work or not. I just find it fascinating. But on that point about hate speech and things like that, there was a survey and subsequently an article in The Guardian by an American academic. I think he's an American anyway. And it was headlined, are a few people ruining the internet for the rest of us? And he sort of points out that a lot of the kind of abuse and the nastiness comes from a tiny percentage of internet and social media users. I think that's probably true, but it does set the tone for the internet, and therefore it can actually affect the material world. We've seen some, things, like a lot of things in recent years, spread from Twitter, let's say, into riots.
That's, very true. But the fact of life and humanity is that it's always the few who ruin it for everybody else. All right. And that's why the law keeps changing, because the law is there and there's the rules, and somebody finds a workaround or a misinterpretation. As we were saying, this is why the lawyers demand such precise language and stuff like that. But they find a workaround, then they have to change the law in order to fix that workaround. It's like, the majority of people would probably drive at a reasonable speed. But there are always those people who want to do 180 kilometers on a 30 kilometer road.
Yeah.
So you've got to have a rule for that. It's that's just human life. Moving on, next story this week is desktop share. So we have Windows, kind of takes up a huge, and then of course you got Mac OS takes another part. Yeah. But there is a welcome third party.
Yeah, it's kind of bittersweet for me. Linux is fine, which I'm talking to you through a Linux on an old laptop, an old Lenovo ThinkPad right now.
Good man.
Has hit 5% share. I first used Linux in the late 90s when it was sort of very rough and ready. I was a Mac user at the time, and I think because I went to art school, and Mac with back then was well under 5%. So first of all, I just like to see a bit of diversity out there. I don't want to see any one company, whether that's Microsoft or Apple or anyone else, dominating things. I like to see a bit of choice. But I also want to see compatibility. I want to be able to run all the apps that I need to run, which in my case I can do in Linux. There actually are some professional areas where you still can't do that, but that's the way it is. What's interesting is, first of all, how good Linux has become. There's been a lot of work. It was always good from a sort of stability point of view, but from a user interface point of view now, it's just as easy as Windows, probably easier, frankly.
Okay.
But the funny thing is, it's not people like me resurrecting old laptops, and it's not really corporates that have caused this. Even though a lot of EU countries are, particularly local councils, are sort of pushing people toward Linux in their administrations and LibreOffice and all these alternatives, open source and free alternatives. Which is great, by the way, but one of the things that has really driven it is Steam Decks, which run Linux, and they are a huge amount of the game market out there is Steam Decks. So it's bittersweet for me because, I don't know, does this really count as desktop use? Are these machines being used for anything other than playing games and a little bit of light social media? I don't know.
But when it comes to Linux, right, Linux is not as powerful as Windows or Mac OS, and you need a really powerful machine and really powerful software to run games. So why is Steam Decks and Linux finding a happy marriage?
Well, yeah, it's not really that Linux isn't more powerful. Linux will run on a less powerful machine, significantly less powerful machine. You can get a lot of extra life out of an old machine. But the reason that Steam Decks run Linux is just because it was there and they needed an operating system. They wanted to produce a gaming device, and they didn't want to have to code it from the ground up, and they didn't want to have to sign a massive contract with Microsoft that would give them 40% of the profits or whatever. So they looked around, they saw an operating system just basically sitting there. It's completely open, it's completely free. So they took it and they built on top of it, and they released them to the world, and they've been a bit of, and they're not the mainstream of gaming, but they're pretty big. They're a big hit, and they're often used as kind of second devices. Those Steam Decks, people that own them tend to have another computer, possibly a laptop and a big gaming rig as well.
Well, do you know what I'd highly recommend if you're looking for a weekend project and you've got an old computer lying around, or you've got an old laptop lying around, is just grab it and install some form of Linux on it. Just Google it or AI Perplexity or whatever for the instructions on how to do it.
Yeah, it's ridiculously easy these days. All you need is a USB stick. You download it, etch it on. You can follow the instructions. And, I'll go so far as to make a couple of recommendations. Linux Mint, really easy to use. Zorin, Zorin, which is two guys in Dublin. Very easy to use. I was about to
say that, yeah.
Yeah.
And Zorin is great. Because when you look at Zorin, it's kind of like it's immediately familiar to you. So I really like it. There you go. There's a weekend project for you. Let's get on to data centers. All right, always something that makes people go grrr. Mark Zuckerberg had a post up during the week. He said that Meta are building a data center which is the size of, get this, Manhattan. If you've ever been to New York City, all right, imagine walking from the top of Central Park right down to, Freedom Tower, or where the Trade Center used to be, Battery Park, and that is the size of the data center that they're building. It's just ridiculous. But these things take a lot of electricity, but they also take an awful lot of water.
Water, yeah. I've changed opinion on this because when this argument started in an Irish context a few years ago, I got quite fed up with people saying, oh, the tech industry is stealing our electricity. And it's like, well, actually, it's not the tech industry. It's you. You're doing it because you're doing all these things online. However, I've sort of changed my opinion now because I really feel that the processing power that is required by AI specifically has really upped the amount. Like all of these data center companies, whether they're the private data centers or the ones owned by Google and so on, they've all dropped their environmental, corporate, social responsibility policies in the last year.
Yeah.
Or at least significantly toned them down. And the reason they're doing that is they know they're going to be using more electricity to do the AI. They know they're going to be using more water for the cooling. And at a certain point, I think it's just a bit too much. It's just, hold on. We need to think about the infrastructure here. We need to think about who does water belong to? Well, I think it belongs to the nation, not to some private company that's just consuming it all. There has to be a way to manage this. I don't know what it is yet, but what I find sort of terrifying is that there's been a lot of talk about companies running their own little nuclear reactors to generate power. And it's just like, I don't know. I'm kind of pro-nuclear, but like not in that. I don't want private companies just randomly running small nuclear reactors. I feel like we're getting out of control with this kind of stuff. Is it really? Is there no such thing as a public realm? Is this another enclosure? Like the enclosure of the common lands a couple of hundred years ago. I just find it slightly worrying.
It is utter bananas the way that it's going. And you're right, it's AI that is driving it. I mean, in Ireland here, about 20, I can't remember what it is, slightly over 20% of Ireland's total electricity consumption, data centres. Yeah. A fifth goes on data centres. That's just bananas. And in 2015, which is 10 years ago, I read it was 5%.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just gone up, 4 or 5 times in the space of 10 years. And then it's accelerating even more now with the use of AI. And you're right, in the States, they are actually looking at small nuclear reactors to power the data centers.
Yeah.
But Google have done a deal this week. Tell me about that. They're not going the data, or they're not going to Google, or they're not going the nuclear route.
Yeah, it's slightly less worrying that they've signed a $3 billion hydropower deal to get up to 3 gigawatts. So you always have to worry about those phrases, up to. But anyway, up to 3 gigawatts of hydropower just to run their data centers. They signed a deal with a company called Brookfield Asset Management, which sounds like a private equity company, but they generate electricity at 2 facilities in Pennsylvania, and Google is going to build its data centers nearby and in sort of neighboring states and take the hydroelectricity directly. I guess in some sense it is coming from the grid, but it's not coming from the public grid. It's sort of it's a private energy deal. But yeah, I mean, would that electricity have been generated otherwise? I think it would have been, and I think it would have went into the public grid. So, this is still kind of worrying stuff, or at least it's the kind of thing we need to be paying more attention to. Let's not be alarmist and call it worrying. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that they're using hydropower, because if they're going to use the hydropower to generate their electricity, they can also use that same water to cool it.
Yeah.
So you're getting double use out of it. There was a story, and I can't remember where it was, whether it was in Ireland, or I don't think it was in Ireland. I think it was somewhere else in the world. But it was a town with a data centre nearby, and the locals are up in arms because their water bills are going up and up and up because the data centre is hogging all of the water. And that's kind of like, if you can't have water, that's the most basic of human requirements. It's nuts. And then the other thing with AI and the amount of electricity that I use, and this makes me smile, and I've changed my behavior because of this. Apparently there's a certain percentage of use of AI. I think it's something like 5% or 10% of all AI data consumption, power, blah, 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 is all used to reply to people saying, thank you, at the end of a query.
I don't know. I mean, that is just comical. But I mean, in the AI stuff that I now receive from people that I can detect is AI. So I'm sure there's lots of AI coming my way that I'm not even aware of, and other forms of machine learning that we maybe don't call AI. But the stuff that is obvious to me when I read it, that, this person hasn't really written that email to me, they've got an AI. I feel like they have used it. They've summarized a document that was probably created by AI. And then they've used it to send me an email via AI. And I'm just thinking, like, is any human at any point ever going to read any of this? Was any of this actually necessary? So I do sort of worry about the use we're putting AI to. And we do seem to be producing a lot of nonsense But,
anyway, listen, I want to get onto the darker side of AI in a second, but first, while we're talking about power and digging stuff up from the earth, and rare earth materials seems to be a big thing between the States and China as two nations. But then there's another tension. Yeah, there you go. Then there's another corporate nation called Apple who are doing their own rare earth deal. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, we all know that the US President Donald Trump has got China in his sights, and it's not just tariffs. China responded, of course, by curbing exports. I mean, it wants to develop its own tech industry. China's doing some very interesting, terrifying things with tech, but we'll come to that another day, perhaps. So Apple has now signed a deal so that it can get what are called rare earth magnets from without going through a kind of Chinese supply chain. Again, I felt this was a little bit similar to the power story. Obviously, we all know that electronic devices require these rare earth materials. This is not a surprise to us. But the fact that these companies are having to sign their own private deals sort of feels new to me. I feel like this is the kind of stuff, this kind of primary industry mining stuff, you would have just picked it up on the open market before. But now you're having to go and sign your own deals directly with mining companies. I just think that there's something we need to note here, whether it's the scale of the amount of stuff that they need, or it's the trade tensions between the US and China and EU. Something is definitely changing, and the market for these kind of rare earths is becoming more and more complicated.
And it worries you.
It does, because I feel like they should be a generic commodity. Like, in a sense, when you think about something like crude oil, right? When you buy crude oil, not that we ever buy, but when one buys crude oil, you just buy it on the open market because it's completely fungible. One barrel of crude oil is the same as another barrel of crude oil. The only differentiation between the two might be sanctions or something. If certain countries like Venezuela or Iran aren't allowed to sell into the open market, they do it illegally, of course, instead. So in that case, the open market has always been the place where you just buy your commodity. It really is just literally a commodity. The fact that companies are sort of having to strike their own private deals does suggest a kind of breakdown of that supply chain and global market for commodities.
That's what I love about you, Jason. You make me think. I can't go and ask AI about this. I need to use my own brain. It's terrible. Also in Apple news this week, do you remember the Irish tax case with Apple that's been rumbling on for blah, 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 and it was appealed and it's all over now. It's done. The money has been paid. What's the result?
Ireland is, I don't live there anymore, but would I have got a check in the post? No,
the result is that Apple paid 14.3 billion into the Irish, into an escrow account, just as sitting there. All right. So it was 14.3 was the number paid by Apple, and Ireland received 14.2. So we got a little less. And this is the madness of it, right? Because in 2018, there was a bit of an economic crisis, and the value of everything dropped, including the money that Apple put into that escrow account. And it's taken 2018 up until now 7 years for it to recover to its original value. And it hasn't even kind of really hit that. And as for that, I mean, of course, Pascal O'Donoghue at this very minute is busy sitting at his desk writing a check to every single person in the country and giving them like €100,000. Asterisk, part of that statement may not be true.
Yeah, I was going to be silly about it, but just to put slightly more serious gloss on that point.
Yeah,
I think everyone is worried about the potential for a recession. The global economy has been quite strange since COVID. The US tariff thing is scaring everyone.
Yep.
All of the indicators for the future I hear in Ireland are good still, not as good as they would have been if all this hadn't been happening, but the official people aren't worried about a recession. Now, and I don't want to be one of those people that predicts, there's a recession coming every 5 minutes, doom and gloom.
Yeah.
But you do sort of think, well, the last time we got into trouble, it would have been nice if we'd had a bit of cash lying around. So let's just hope that there is a bit of cash invested in sovereign wealth, and we can sort of counter-cyclically spend our way out of problems if problems do come in the coming.
What do you mean? You see, if a recession is coming, Okay, it's only a matter of timing, because what goes up must come down, and what comes down must go back up again. That's the way the world of finance
that's true,
works.
but a technical recession isn't that big a deal. It's obviously a big deal if you lose your job. But what I mean is that, like the 2008 scenario where the whole country just ground to a halt. I mean, I don't know about you or listeners, but I felt that the sky darkened and dimmed and was closer to my head than it had ever been.
Yeah, that's probably one of the worst that we've ever had. There was another recession in the 80s. That was pretty bad as well. My brother was worried because he's kind of, he says Donald Trump and my pension and it's all a disaster and da-da-da-da. And I had to point out to him, I said, things go up and down, up and down, up and down. And it doesn't matter until the day you retire, and fingers crossed that day, everything will be on and up. That's all you need to worry about. And he's kind of, but it hasn't been this bad before. And I went, well, now let's have a look. And from the top of my head, because I can't remember too much from the 90s or the 80s, but I did say we had the dot-com bubble. All right. There was a huge crash around that. September 11, there was a huge crash around that as well. We had the financial crisis, the global financial, which you mentioned in 2008. Then there was a European sovereign debt crisis, if I'm not mistaken, in around 2014 or maybe a few years before that. Then we had the COVID-19 recession then, of course. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And by the way,
that's in the last 25 years.
These things can have a big impact. I mean, I graduated from art school just as the dot-com bubble burst, and I was expecting to go into a career in web design, and that obviously didn't happen. And I'm not complaining about it. You find something else to do, and I'm happier. But what goes up does come down, and I don't want to sort of be blasé about it and say, oh, it'll recover, you'll be fine. But if you're talking about your pension, probably will. What any individual can do if they go into a job market that's bad, I don't know. That's a much more complicated question. But you're absolutely right. Anyone who's sort of fretting over their pension and constantly logging in and looking, it's down 2% today, you're driving yourself insane.
Exactly. There's no need to do it. A friend of mine is selling a house and they were worried about the price if things go down and if things crash. And I said, okay, how much did you pay for the house? They paid 100 grand for the house, whatever it was, decades ago. Okay. And I said, what is it worth now? And they said it's worth 600,000. Okay,
well then.
Great. I said, okay, so if you're going to make a profit of 500,000. And he goes, yes, but I'm really worried about blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, grant 500,000. If there is a crash, okay, and a crash will be defined as the things devaluing by 20%. That's a huge dip. All right. So that takes 20% off the price of your property. I said, so 600,000. So that'll be 120,000 would go down. So now you're making 480,000, which means you're making 380,000, say 400,000 odd profit instead of 500,000. You're still in the money.
I know. I think one of the problems there is people in their heads, particularly Irish people, because they've become so obsessed with property over the last 30 years, tend to think of the value of their house at any given moment, which can be very notional, as money that they have, but it's not. You know, it's money you might have, maybe.
Yeah. Now we're getting into finance now. Let's stick with tech and go with the dark side of AI, which I mentioned in our introduction. Because when AI first appeared, 2-3 years ago, the phrase that went around was, you won't be replaced by an AI, but you will be replaced by somebody using AI. So you need to incorporate this into your workflow, blah, 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 blah. All right. It turns out now with Microsoft, who own Candy Crush, they've had their developers working on AI to speed up their processes and stuff like that. And it looks like those Candy Crush developers have developed themselves out of a job because Microsoft are making cutbacks and they're replacing workers who worked on that very AI project with the AI that they designed.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, I can't say that it's unexpected, but I still think, I'm totally unsurprised that the first claim was you won't be replaced by AI, and then secretly, we're replacing you with AI. That just does not surprise me at all. There's no doubt that AI can do things a lot faster than humans, but there are more and more kind of security issues coming up. Particularly, I'm thinking about in the field of development here. AI is producing insecure code. It can be a threat vector because it's basing its code off other code that it found on GitHub, and who knows who wrote that. There was a study recently suggested that coders who work with AI are actually less productive than ones who do. So I think what's happening really here is that so much money has been pumped into AI, and we are talking serious amounts of money, that they need to get some value out of it, because if it doesn't produce any value, then, it's all been a waste of time. And, so how do you create value? Well, you either get money out of people, like you sell them something, and a lot of the AI products are moving toward a kind of consumption-based pay model, or you use it for efficiency so that your costs go down. And those are just the two easiest ways to make money. So I think there's a big push on the business side, on the finance side, dealing with the shareholders, the quarterly reports. Show me what all these billions have actually paid for. Yeah. Show me, as the movie said, show me the money. I think that's what's going on.
You know, as you're talking and we're having this conversation, it's reminding me of something we just mentioned in and around 2000 with the dot-com bubble. I think, could it be that we're going for an AI bubble?
I think it's absolutely inevitable. And what's interesting about that is I think it will follow a very similar trajectory. Because if you say to people now there's an AI bubble, they'll go, nonsense, AI is brilliant. You go, I didn't say it wasn't. All I said was there's a bubble, right? And it's going to burst. Yeah. Amazon went down to almost worthless at the time of the AI bubble. It's now one of the largest companies in the world, certainly the biggest retailer. Other companies, pets.com, went completely bust and were never heard of again. A crash doesn't mean that the whole technology or all the businesses built around it are going to get wiped out. It just means there will be a big reckoning. You know, a lot of them will get wiped out. Some of them will come back 10 times more powerful than they were before. I am absolutely convinced. Yeah, I think we are in the midst of an absolute AI bubble. But anyone who said at the time of the dot-com bubble, well, that's it, you can pack up the internet, we're finished now, well, they would have looked pretty stupid in a few years. So,
listen, finally for this week, kind of tech or more sci-fi related, Darth Vader's lightsaber is coming up for auction later this year. It's the actual lightsaber that was used in the first three movies. Do you remember the title of the first three movies from the 70s and 80s?
The first one was called A New Hope. I can't remember. And then The Empire Strikes Back.
Correct.
That was the third one.
No, that was the second one. That was number 5. And then number 6.
Return of the Jedi. My secret, I am not a big fan. Never was. Never seen them.
What?
Seriously, seen bits of them. Never seen them all.
You've never seen an entire Star Wars movie?
I saw one of the sequels in its entirety when it came out in the cinema. I went with a friend. But I've never seen one of the originals. I've seen the first hour or so of the first one 1 million times because in school when it rained, they used to put it on when I was in primary school.
Well, do you remember or have you seen the classic scene of Darth Vader with the lightsaber and he's up against Obi-Wan Kenobi and Obi-Wan Kenobi puts down his lightsaber and Darth Vader just cuts him in half and makes him disappear or whatever. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm certainly familiar with the lightsabers and it's in our cultural, you go. Stew, isn't it? That
exact lightsaber, which was used in that exact scene in that exact movie, is up for auction. Do you know what the starting price is? What would you pay? Well, no, what would you pay? Take a guess at what the starting price is, because you or I would never pay it.
Yeah, well, no, I think it's going to be very, very high. I'm going to estimate that the starting price will be like $500,000, but it'll go for far more.
The starting price, 750,000, and I believe that's sterling, and that is also equal to the average house price in South Dublin.
Yeah, well, I guess there are a lot of fans out there, and some of them are apparently quite wealthy. I mean, it's obviously absurd, but, it's not the first time. It's not, sports memorabilia, comic books, all kinds of things.
They all go. But it's like the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. You have seen The Wizard of Oz, yeah?
I have seen The Wizard of Oz.
Thank God for that. It's as iconic as the ruby slippers are there. And with that, listen, let's click our heels 3 times and say, take us home. Jason Walsh, thank you for your opinion and keeping us up to date and your expertise on this week's news.
Thanks for having me, Dusty.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's it for our show this week. Do check out some more stories that we have online for you, including X is accused of violating EU privacy legislation, not for the first time. Why ChatGPT can be detrimental to your critical thinking skills, something that we've just been talking about. And Meta are taking a stand and will not adjust their pay or consent model despite a risk of EU fines, and big ones as well. All of those stories and more online for you right now at techcentral.ie. We're back again next Friday with a brand new show online and on RT Radio 1 Extra. In the meantime, please do share our podcast with a friend. If they're into tech and gadgets and all that kind of stuff, just tell them to look up Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify or YouTube. Until next time, from myself, Dusty, and from Jason Walsh, thank you for listening. Have a great weekend.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland, or listen with RTE Radio 1 Extra. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.